It is my privilege right now to provide the historical background to the Michael S. Gordon Center for Research in Medical Education lectureship. In January 2006, as Michael DeVita was coming in as a program chair, he engaged in conversation with Barry Eisenberg. And he said, Barry, wouldn't it be incredible if we could really, like other more well-formed organizations with more tenure, have a sponsored lectureship, an endowed lectureship? And they said this would be good. And Michael went on to say, but it's going to take us a number of years to be able to do that. Maybe in the next 5 to 10 years we'll be able to do that. Well, Barry went back to Miami, never the one to just sit and let others do and achieve the goal. And he started conversations with the board of directors and supporters of the Michael S. Gordon Center. And so from January 2006, by February 2006, he engaged in this conversation. And he brought to the board a proposal. In April, the board met. And in May, the members of the organization received the following email from its president, Dan Raymer, at the time. As president of the Society for Simulation in Healthcare, I'm very pleased to announce the most generous contribution to endow a named lectureship at our annual meeting, the International Meeting on Simulation in Healthcare. The Michael S. Gordon Center for Research in Medical Education at the University of Miami has donated $100,000 to endow this lectureship in perpetuity. The Michael S. Gordon Center for Research in Medical Education lectureship has held a prominent place at our meeting and given us this opportunity to honor speakers of great accomplishment and importance in the field of simulation. The lectureship is a tribute to, of course, Michael S. Gordon, MD, PhD, who has had lifelong dedication to healthcare learning through his Harvey simulators and cardiology-related educational programs. We are deeply indebted to him and the University of Miami for their commitment. 120 days from the time the thought was generated. What a response, both from the people who were involved, Michael DeVita and Barry Eisenberg, and from the center, and for the people they wish to, the person they wish to honor. And so the recommendation for the selection criteria for the lectureship was set. Outstanding contributions to healthcare simulation and patient safety in any or all areas of technical achievement, curriculum development, program implementation, teaching, and/or outcomes assessment. High-level government or medical officials whose past or current responsibilities related to healthcare simulation education were also eligible. This is a society, and these are individuals who believe in innovation, who believe in action-oriented leadership. The culmination of this award in but 4 months demonstrates, gives us tangible proof of what can be done when an idea comes together and when people come together. So it is my privilege now to hand this over to Paul Frampus, who will introduce our speaker of this year's lectureship. Thank you.
Thank you, Beth, and for everybody that doesn't know, Dr. Gordon's sitting right down here front and center, so I'd like to really give him a round of applause. So it is my privilege to introduce somebody who over the last several years I can say has become a friend. He really needs no introduction, so I'm going to keep it extremely short so we can get on with the scholarly aspect of his presentation. But from many different backgrounds and meeting many different people around the world, I'd have to say when his name comes up in conversation, it seems like it does me good to know him because he is the name that generates as much excitement as anybody I know when I run into people, whether it's in China, Singapore, or in Germany. It's remarkable. Pediatrician, fighter pilot, you name it, it's been checked off on his CV along the way. But probably most important, and luckily for us, he's engaged in a pursuit just a few years ago that everybody said isn't going to happen. And that is, can we really engage in simulation for high-stakes evaluation, for decision-making in career pathways and things like that? And Amitai Ziv is going to give us a keynote plenary session on just that, a look at the current state of simulation and the integration and fate of high-stakes assessment. Without further ado, Dr. Ziv.
I'm really honored, and thank you, Paul, for this very kind introduction. My honor is, of course, augmented with the very fact that this lecture is under the auspice of my dear friend, Michael Gordon. Michael is a pioneer, a colleague, a real mentor to so many of us here in the field of medical simulation, and an inspiration to many of us in terms of the passion and the consistency and the belief that we are doing something that is actually improving the world. And thank you, Michael, for your years of doing it. I will try to share with you in the next 45 minutes our take, or my take, of a national simulation-based high-stakes assessment. It's a challenge. We've embarked on this challenge back in Israel for quite some time. We've learned many lessons, and I'll try to share them with you in the upcoming minutes. In terms of disclosure, some work with Symbionics and a consultant to Michener Institute in Toronto. So I'd like to start with giving us all a sense of assessment in medicine. Are we, in fact, going through a paradigm shift? I will challenge us that we should, but we are just here, I think, in this junction of shifting gears towards something different. I'll share with you the story of the Israel Center for Medical Simulation, MESER, in terms of our experience in high-stakes exams, and how much we think it really triggered a cultural change in terms of patient safety, quality care, certainly in the spirit of what Rona Flynn shared with us about safety culture. And the lessons, challenges, barriers, and of course insights towards the future. For those of us who are not sure about this term, high-stakes exams, high-stakes would mean, as Paul said before, exams that passing or failing it will have an implication on your employment, certification, a serious implication. So as Paul mentioned, I was introduced to simulation in my days in the Israeli Air Force. Moving on to medicine was a cultural shock in so many different ways. Certainly the safety culture of healthcare in those days. But I think for our purpose today, the assessment culture of the Air Force compared to the assessment culture in medicine is quite a shocking cultural gap. And don't let's forget, aviation doesn't only assess technical skills, but it takes very seriously non-cognitive skills of teamwork and many personal traits as well, obviously. So in my own personal move in my career from Air Force instructors and assessor, rater of air cadets, into medicine, pediatrics, and a lot of years of work with the ECFMG. And I was privileged to work with the ECFMG in those days when they were doing the first steps with the clinical skills assessment applied on foreign graduates in '98. Again, low-tech, high-touch simulation, OSCE, which really paved my way into being passionate believer in assessment as a driving force in education and standards. And I moved on back to Israel to serve as Deputy Director of the Sheba Medical Center, where I'm actually the patient safety officer there, dealing with risk management, quality assurance, but also had the privilege of founding the Simulation Center back in Israel, In that respect, this is the link that, again, Rona Flynn spoke about in the first lecture about feeding healthcare education and assessment from actual deficiencies that are well reported or not well reported in the risk management patient safety arena. So this is Sheba Medical Center, a large government-owned center in the middle of Israel, pretty large, I believe, in international standards as well. Back to the premise of my talk. I think we're all well aware of the fact that the current patient safety or quality care is suboptimal. And we learned that only in the last 10, 12 years in numbers that came with error reports worldwide. And the underlying assumption or hypothesis is that medical education, and more so medical assessment, has a share in this reality. We as medical educators should be taken as accountable to a degree on the very fact that we don't have a safe health care. And another aspect of this underlying assumption or hypothesis is that a change in the assessment paradigm could make a difference. It could make a difference in terms of making us more effective, safer, more ethical healthcare education. It could and should improve readiness and preparedness of health professionals in all fields. And of course, will eventually improve accountability of the healthcare training process. So when we talk about the safety Swiss cheese model and kind of adopt it to medical education, or in this case, medical assessment, we should look at ourselves as a product line that some of our products at the end of the Swiss cheese model come out as accidents. They shouldn't have graduated. They shouldn't have been with us because we may have not done a good enough job in all the process throughout. And part of it is related to the Swiss cheese holes that have to do with the way we select people into the field and on what traits do we select them. How do we actually train them? The see one, do one, teach one, kill one approach is not necessarily the only one. And of course, the competency assessment. To what degree do we have this paradigm component, I mean, this assessment of competencies, the important ones, obviously, at the end of each steps in our ongoing medical career. And that, of course, goes into the maintenance of certification, things that are well established in aviation, for example, but far from being well established in medicine still today. And the last revolution in medical education took place exactly 100 years ago by Robert Flexner, who really set up the modern medical education structure that we all know and pretty much work along with, which is the preclinical world and the clinical world, apprentice, of course, mostly. And one missing component in the Flexner model was the component of objective, standardized standards for proficiency assessment. He did, of course, appreciate assessment and clinical competence, but to what degree was it standardized and objective? I think it wasn't. And we're now seeing in the last 10 years more and more components of safety curriculum. I was privileged to sit again with Rona Flynn on this committee on behalf of the WHO, which only a year and a half ago issued a curriculum on patient safety, which is now worldwide available and has a lot of simulation-based components within this curriculum. We are running it now back in Israel at the Tel Aviv University program. So we're all aware of the fact that the foundation of competence, knowledge, and technical skill is not enough, skills are not enough, that we need to move on up into the professional behavior, the non-technical skills, the safety skills. These are all skills that are very much important in terms of the assessment model because we've been emphasizing too much the easy to measure rather than the important to measure. And we've been pretty much slaves of the measurable rather than really moving on to new horizons of making the important measured. And we need to measure, and we need to measure higher order competencies mentioned previously by many other speakers, you know, the safety skills, handover, adherence to guidelines, error recovery skills, teamwork skills have been discussed in this conference again and again for years. Multicultural skills will really affect production and, outcome and process. Reflective skills, we are lifelong learners. Can we reflect on our doings, on our errors? Can we do better? in terms of self-debriefing, and of course personal traits. Are we doing enough in terms of selecting and augmenting those traits that make a big difference in our professional world?